Israel forces struck Gaza today, hitting terrorist infrastructure after an ambush that killed an Israeli soldier. Fears are growing that Hamas's repeated challenges to the truce could make it crumble. Joining me now is Washington Stand reporter Casey Harper, who's been following today's main developments. Casey, what's the latest from Israel as this fragile truce continues to be tested by the Hamas terrorist?
Yeah, Tony, seemingly tested every day as Hamas is continuing to violate the ceasefire and Israel is holding him accountable. Now, one key violation here has been the release of those deceased hostages, and we do have an update on that. Hamas said it actually released 2 of those hostages today. The remains are currently being transported to Israel for identification and burial. Now, under the peace agreement, Hamas was supposed to release all the hostages, living and dead, in exchange for Palestinian prisoners and Israel pulling back somewhat from Gaza. But as you know, Hamas has held back bodies, which is threatening the peace deal. On top of that, Israel killed dozens of Hamas terrorists in airstrikes after an attack that killed an Israeli soldier. And even just this morning, we have a report of new airstrikes in southern Gaza, raising fears that this shaky truce is about to collapse. Now, one more thing, Tony. Israel actually carried out attacks against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon today in response to an overnight raid that killed a local worker.
Well, this ceasefire is certainly shaky. Chris Mitchell with CBN News. He is the Middle East Bureau Chief. He's going to join me here in the studio a little bit later to discuss the future of this fragile truce, and we're going to talk about it a little bit more, I'm sure. So, Casey, President Trump has returned from his trip to Asia, and his meeting with China's leader has dominated headlines over the last 24 hours. What were the outcomes that we're aware of from this meeting in South Korea?
Well, President Trump called the meeting a 12 out of 10, and that's because they hit several of their goals going into that meeting. So President Trump's meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea, it's actually their first face-to-face talk since 2019 in Trump's first term. And we did have some big developments. For one, the 2 leaders agreed to cut tariffs on Chinese goods in exchange for China cracking down on fentanyl, since of course that fentanyl inevitably ends up in the U.S. and kills Americans. Another takeaway is that China is going to resume purchasing soybeans, and they're going to pause their export controls on rare earth minerals for a year, and those minerals are really important for microchip and AI development.
It was an outstanding group of decisions, I think, that was made. A lot of decisions were made, too. There wasn't too much left out there. We had a long meeting, as you know, but a lot of things we discussed in great detail. A lot of things we brought to finalization. A lot of finalization.
Now, we had one more kind of surprising announcement before the president's meeting with Xi. He announced that the U.S. is going to resume nuclear weapons testing for the first time in 30 years. He pointed out that Russia and China are already doing the same. And according to initial reports, as you mentioned, issues like Taiwan and sadly the religious persecution of Christians in China apparently did not come up in the meeting. But Trump said he plans to visit China in April and invited Xi to the U.S., so there could be another opportunity, Tony.
Thanks, Casey. The persecution of Christians in China is a major issue. As I mentioned, Congressman Chris Smith will join me shortly to discuss the Chinese Communist Party's crackdown on Christians and what steps are needed to defend Christians in China and around the world. Before we go to Congressman Smith, let's shift gears just a moment and discuss the latest on the government shutdown. Casey, if the Schumer shutdown continues, many programs, including those that support children and the most vulnerable Americans, will run out of money. Is there any indication that the Democrats are concerned about this?
Yeah, well, you're right that the pain is ratcheting up from this shutdown, Tony. I think Democrats are feeling the pressure, and maybe they do care, but they feel stuck. And if this shutdown continues, it's only going to get worse. For instance, education and child care services for tens of thousands of kids will face cuts this weekend. That's $12.3 billion for the Head Start program, which serves nearly 70,000 kids and is running out of funds. House Speaker Mike Johnson, he put it this way. He said this morning that Democrats are basically being held hostage by their far-left base.
Mondami winning New York City would be the biggest win for the Marxists, the socialists, in the history of this country. We have, to this point, in nearly 250 years, been able to hold off those kinds of ideas. We've been able to cling to the foundational principles of America, the ideas of individual freedom and limited government and the rule of law and peace through strength and fiscal responsibility and free markets and human dignity. All those things are in jeopardy when the Marxists take over. And it's the clearest sign yet that the Democrats' radical Marxist wing is winning the battle for control of their party.
Well, the shutdown has also furloughed 700,000 federal workers and threatens to cut SNAP benefits or food stamps for 42 million Americans, all making the pressure grow to make a deal and reopen the government on what is now day 30 of the shutdown, Tony.
Wow. All right, Casey, thanks for that update. You took us around the world in just a couple of minutes.
That's right.